That's the one big lesson I've learned. You're not going to win by being reactive. You have to be proactive. You have to have a vision that you can present to the people. If we had a vision to present to the people of the world in 68, there may have been a world revolution. If Occupy Wall Street had a vision to present to the world in 2011, we may have done something incredible. And now we may have a third crack at it, and we'd better get our shit together.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Liminal News podcast. Today I'm delighted to be here with Kalle Lasn, the publisher of Adbusters and the author of a recent book on world revolution. So Kalle, maybe just tell us a little bit about you, about your background, how you ended up being this provocateur and all the good things you do.
So I'm the guy who started Adbusters magazine. My God, it's like, I think it's 30 plus years ago now, and I've been putting that out now, over the last 30 years, I've sort of noticed how the world seems to be sinking into a deeper and deeper funk, and I've become more of a rabid kind of a angry activist, who's constantly looking for ways to sort of change things. I've also published a bunch of other books. The very first book I published was called Culture Jam. It came out about 25 years ago, and it was a bestseller, and it showed me, it taught me that if you've got some really big ideas like culture jamming revolution, then people will respond. So that gave me a huge boost. And then after that, I published another book called Design Anarchy, which was focused on the design community, trying to tell them to sort of stop kissing corporate ass and start doing something good, because designers are the most powerful people in the world, and if they can design a future that computes, then wonderful. Then after that, I published another book after Occupy Wall Street called Meme Wars, and this was all about economics. Anyway, so that's who I am, a publisher of Adbusters, author of a few books, and that latest book, Manifesto for World Revolution, this is my blueprint for how we can work our way out of this incredible funk that we're in now.
Just out of curiosity, I want to rewind a little bit further and just ask you like where you grew up and what you studied and what kind of work you did before you got into Adbusters.
Yeah, so I was born in Estonia, and when the Russians came in, my family escaped, and we finished up in in Australia. And I grew up there, went to university there. I studied pure and applied mathematics, and I worked for the Australian Defence Department there for 3 years after university, because they paid for my university and I owed them 3 years, and I was actually using some early software in those days and fighting wars, virtual wars for the Australian Defence Department. And then after that, I felt like I had to go back to Europe, where I was born, and find my roots there. But I was hijacked by Japan. My boat stopped off in Japan there, and I had 3 days to spend in Tokyo. And when the 3 days was up, I just couldn't get back on the boat. So I finished up just saying to hell with Europe, and I just stayed in Japan, and my whole life was.
You were just fascinated by the culture and by the vibe, or
it absolutely blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. I liked the food. I liked the sexual atmosphere. I liked the women. I liked the culture. I started reading all the literature there and getting involved in Zen, and it totally hijacked my life. And I finished up marrying a Japanese woman, and then after that, I realized that I could never really play politics in Japan, because it's a very closed kind of a society that doesn't really allow outsiders, gaijin as they call them, to come in. So I decided that I have to leave. And then my wife and I, we immigrated to Canada. This was back in 1973, a long time ago, and I've been strutting my stuff here ever since.
You have been strutting your stuff, that's for sure. I mean, the magazine is great, very influential. I was very happy because I kept seeing quotes from my work kind of in the front pages, but we never had a direct communication. And then I was a little bit, it was sort of kind of, people would say, "Oh, your quotes are in Adbusters," but nobody ever like sent me a copy or anything. So it was very like a samizdat kind of experience. But I was happy to see, yeah, generally the kind of ideas you guys were working with. And I know you got involved with Occupy Wall Street. So how did that come about?
Yeah, well, we were the people who sparked it. We were the people who came up with the idea that we were inspired by the Arab Spring, and it felt like an incredible moment in human history at that time, and then also the young people in America at that time were also sort of disillusioned and very similar to the situation now. Actually, all kinds of graduates who had spent a lot of money and owed a lot of money, they couldn't find jobs, and meanwhile the Arab Spring was churning away with revolutions happening in the Middle East. And then one day in one of our brainstorming sessions here at Adbusters, we sort of said, hey, you know, why not? If there's an Arab Spring, then why not an American Spring? Let's do something wild and see if we can trigger something. And we came up with this idea of occupying the iconic heart of global capitalism, which is Wall Street, and somehow we started talking to a few people in New York, and hallelujah, on the 17th of September, which I carefully chose because it was my mother's birthday, and I had this incredibly deep, profound relationship with my mother all my life, and all of a sudden on the 17th of September, a few thousand people actually did exactly that. There was this moment, and then it grew and grew, there was that moment on Brooklyn Bridge when all of a sudden a few very young teenagers were pepper sprayed or something, and thousands were arrested, and so the police and the authorities made some bad mistakes and gave us a lot of publicity, and before we knew it, Occupy Wall Street spread to other places, LA and other Chicago and other places. It went across the border to Canada, and then all of a sudden it started popping up in Europe, and for the second time in my life, I could feel that this was the beginning of what could possibly turn out to be a world revolution. The first time this happened to me was in 1968 when a small uprising in the Latin Quarter of Paris did the same thing as Occupy Wall Street. It suddenly sort of grew and grew, and young people around the world were disillusioned. And in 1968, 1969, there was thousands of universities and uprisings happening all over the world. And for a few brief moments, it actually felt like, my God, if this keeps on going, then this could be the first ever world revolution. And Occupy Wall Street, for me, felt like our second crack at world revolution. And now, this book this book that we just put out, I gotta show it to you. This book, yeah, this book is sort of a bit of a blueprint for possibly a third crack at world revolution.
Yeah. I mean, were you in Paris in 68?
I wasn't in Paris, but I was there soon after. But I was traveling around the world at that time, and I caught the vibe. It was the one political vibe that my first sort of wake up moment when I became politicized, when I suddenly realized that the world wasn't just having a good time and reading nice books and drinking nice lattes, but it was actually about politics. It was actually about changing the world. And at that time, I was actually traveling in India. I was traveling in Mexico, in Central America, and I saw the poverty that existed around the world, especially in India. I'll never forget in Calcutta, seeing the people literally dying in the streets there. I mean, India's changed a lot since then, but in those days, traveling around the world, it was an incredible wake-up call to realize that life isn't like Australia, it isn't like America, it isn't like Canada, that actually a lot of the people in the world are living dire lives of deep in poverty, and then on top of that there was that 1968 kind of a world revolution that was bubbling up, and anyway, that was the moment. Those years after 1968 into 19, that's when I became politicized as a and yeah.
I had a good friend who he's a poet, but he passed away, but he was in Paris in '68. And the way he described it is basically the radicals had won. The sort of police and soldiers had given up, but there wasn't really any plan of action to how to recreate society under better terms. So it kind of just like fizzled out, and the old forces just moved back in because that was the
Well, that's the big mistake that we've made in 1968 and also with Occupy Wall Street, that we had the energy, we had the anger, we had the rage, we knew that the world had to change, but we hadn't figured out our memes. We hadn't figured out our narrative. We didn't have a vision that we could present to the world that people could jump on board. And that's why 1968 eventually fizzled out. And when winter came in 2011, the same thing happened to Occupy Wall Street. All of a sudden, all those 2,000 occupations all around the world, they all sort of disappeared as the cold weather came in. And ultimately, we were left with a few slogans like, 1%, 99%, and we were never able to push the ball over the line. And this is the big mistake that I think that we activists have to sort of think about, right now. If we sort of expect there to be some sort of a political resurgence and some sort of a real meaningful change in the world, then I think that we have to figure out what our narrative is. We have to figure out what our vision is. That's one of the reasons why I was so sort of pissed off at No Kings, for example. There they go, 7 million people running around, pointing their fingers, being reactive, and all they were really doing is pointing their finger at Trump and saying, "Oh, you're a bad guy, or you're not a king, and we don't like you." But those 7 million people who were there protesting, I mean, it's wonderful that they're protesting. It's nice to be in a protest and to be rubbing shoulders and having that camaraderie. So I have nothing against that. But where's the vision? Where's the narrative?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, they do.
What do people stand for?
I listened to one of the I listened to one of the leaders of Indivisible, Ezra something, and they have a model, they have a vision that would lead to larger protests as things get more dire. Then that leads to like national strikes and so on, and then
they haven't done their homework. They haven't done. What we really need to do is to say, instead of running out and sort of having a No Kings, why don't we have thousands of little brainstorms all around America? Why don't we get together in small groups and try to figure out what we really stand for? What is our narrative? What is our vision? What's the plan that we want to produce and present to the American people that's better than what Trump is doing? And we haven't done that. We haven't done the homework. We keep on thinking that somehow Trump will crash if we keep on, saying that he's a king and fighting against. But reactive, that's the one big lesson I've learned. You're not going to win by being reactive. You have to be proactive. You have to have a vision that you can present to the people. If we had a vision to present to the people of the world in '68, there may have been a world revolution. If Occupy Wall Street had a vision to present to the world in 2011, we may have done something incredible. And now we may have a third crack at it, and we'd better get our shit together.
So tell me a little bit about what you propose in the manifesto. I mean, what do you have a plan of action for everybody at this point?
Yeah, I think that for me at the moment it's all about somehow getting rid of the old sort of left-right dichotomy. Like all my life, and even before I was born, politics has always been about the left versus the right, and one side wins, then the next side wins, and somehow politics always unfolds as this battle between the left and the right. And I think that for us to have any kind of a future, for us to make it through the 21st century, I think we have to sort of jump over the dead bodies of the old left and right. I think that I call it the third force. I think that the young people, the Gen Z and the generations after Gen Z, they have to come up with a new kind of politics that that is not so much about left versus right, but about how do we make it through the 21st century? How do we fix climate change? How do we change the global financial architecture? How do we flip the paradigm of neoclassical economics? How do we change the capitalist vibe of the world that we all live in? So we have to. So this is like a fundamental shift in politics where the young people of the world, instead of being caught up in this left-right thing, they've got some sort of a vision about how they can live, how they and their children and the future generations can have some kind of a viable future. So the plan is in the plan that I present in this Manifesto for World Revolution book is that that we have to the young people, we have to start brainstorming and asking ourselves what are the big ideas? What I call the meta memes? What are the meta memes that are so big that we can't imagine living without them? What are the big ideas that are so powerful that you cannot imagine a future without those big ideas being implemented? And then we do have the big difference between 1968 and 2011. We really have an internet now. We have this incredible power to sort of get things done on the internet, and we the activists haven't quite learned how to use that properly. But if we have our ideas, if we have our big ideas, if we have our meta memes, if we have our vision and our narrative together, and then if we learn how to use the internet to launch this kind of a global third force where all the activists around the world who believe in some new kind of a politics, we all get together and we start fighting for our meta memes. And I think this, to me, this is the formula for how the young people of the world, need to sort of operate from now on. They have to jump over the old system and come up with something totally new.
Yeah, but I mean, wouldn't a lot of the approaches to make the situation better kind of eventually tilt more towards leftist ideas like progressive taxation or reducing the power of corporations and billionaires?
But
I mean, you can get rid of left and right, but I mean, it still seems like, the right is fighting for oligarchy, and in America, authoritarianism and Christian nationalism, and the left wants everybody to have participation in society and regenerative ecological systems and so on.
Yeah, well, I think that I agree. I mean, I think the vibe will still be sort of a bit of a lefty vibe, but I think there's going to be some new ideas that we have to implement. Like for example, uh, to fix climate change, maybe we need to jump over all the stuff that we've done so far, to try to fix climate change. Maybe we need to come up with a new idea, like one of the ideas in the book is this idea that we need true cost markets. That at the moment the big problem with climate change is that we have a global marketplace where like 99% of the literally billions of transactions that happen in the global marketplace every day, they're unpriced. You buy a car for $35,000 and then you finish up creating $100,000 worth of damage to the environment with your carbon emissions. And now who pays for that? Who pays for that $100,000 of the damage that you get? That should be internalized in the cost of the car. And likewise, if you buy a Big Mac, then the full price of creating that beef and giving you that Big Mac, that should be included in the price of a Big Mac. And that avocado that you buy, from Mexico, the cost of transportation of getting that avocado, into your hands, that should be included in the price of that avocado. And so if we sort of use the power of the market, that the Adam Smith marketplace, that we all know has a certain magic to it. If we can sort of come up with a true cost global marketplace where the price of every product tells the ecological truth, and then all of a sudden, all those bogus transactions that happen every day that are pushing us deeper and deeper into the shit, deeper and deeper into climate apocalypse, all of a sudden that would stop, you know. So this idea that a reform of the global marketplace into a true-cost global marketplace, to me, this feels like a non-violent, soft power way of re-engineering the whole global system in a way that could actually start to solve climate change. And this is a sort of idea that at the moment we're not talking about, you know, and I know it's a long shot, you know, like people, I know we presented this idea.
I mean, the whole kind of ethos of capitalism has been to, hide externalities because, that's how you have cheap consumer goods for, a mass population in the West. And so, I mean, that would be a very leftist, kind of idea, I think, from a right wing perspective. They don't even want to admit that climate change is real. And yeah, I mean, you have last year, all these African guys from the Ivory Coast were flooding into New York City, and I
Mm,
was trying to figure out like what they were doing here, why they came here. And I learned, I was sitting at my local fancy cafe where it's like $14 for a chocolate croissant and a latte, doing my morning work and reading about, Ivory Coast, where a lot of the world's chocolate is produced. And two main American companies, Nestle's and Hershey's, are basically have corrupted the government, and they've deforested the country, so it's like 50% deforested, and people make an average, cocoa farmers make an average of 78 cents a day. And now that the country's deforested, they can't survive anymore. So they're like sending one young man maybe to Brazil or somewhere in South America. He walks for months and months and tries to get across the US border so he can work as like a delivery person here for Uber Eats or something, and then make, $12 an hour
mm.
under, which is way more than he could get per day that he sends a lot of that back home. So yeah, I mean, what you're describing, fair cost accounting, is something I've heard about many times, but it feels like it goes against the ethos of capitalism at this point. Nobody wants to eat a $30 hamburger in America, or
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that activists in general, especially left-wing activists, we don't think big enough. You know, it's you know, that idea that there should be carbon taxes or that we should raise prices. That's been around for a long time. But the idea that maybe in a sort of a Trumpian way almost, you know, that Trump has pulled off these incredible heaves and done stuff that we thought was unimaginable, what he's done to universities and what he's done to the law firms and what he's doing to the whole of America now. He has had this sort of incredible power to show that big heaves in our culture, big heaves in our system can change. But somehow we on the left, we don't have that sort of that feeling that, my God, you know, the two-cost global marketplace, this is an idea that can actually save humanity. Let's fight for it. Let's start a third political party called the Bottoms-Up Majority Party. Let's put that on our platform. Let's get that party elected in, and let's implement true cost markets around the world. I mean, that sort of big time metamimetic thinking is something that we on the left seem to we've lost that ability. We had it when I was in university 50 years ago, but we don't have it anymore. It's gone. And we need to rejuvenate that.
who are some of the thinkers these days that you're really excited about in terms of the magazine, or in terms about mapping out these big meta ideas and meta memes?
I must admit there aren't that many. There's a recent book that came out that got me really excited. I haven't read it yet, but I read about it, and it's called Pirate Care. And it feels like it's like a bit of a manifesto for the Gen Z. And
I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, so I don't quite have that, but I must admit, you know, I like a lot of people's writings. Like, for example, I like your writing. I love your writing. I mean, you take issues and you talk about them in a beautiful way, and writing like that is very hard to come by these days. I struggle every issue of Adbusters to find, you know, writers who can write in a compelling, beautiful way that really seeps into the brain. Um, but I must admit, at the moment, if you ask me, you know, who are my heroes, my activist heroes, I don't have too many.
How
Do
do you
you?
feel about like Yanis Varoufakis and the whole techno-feudalism idea? He's argued that capitalism is kind of done and now we're in a different regime, which he defines as techno-feudalism.
Well, I think it's a good idea, but I must admit that after I listened to him a lot, after that stuff that was happening in Greece there, and somehow there was something frivolous about some of the stuff that he does, and I think there's a lot of good ideas around, and that's one of them. But somehow it doesn't really feel to me like it's going to be one of the huge big meta memes that helps us, navigate the 21st century.
Have you looked at Audrey Tang and the plurality movements?
No.
She's one of the people I find most interesting right now.
Mhm.
So Audrey Tang was a trans woman who was part of a student protest movement in Taiwan, the Sunflower Movement, and the government decided to work with the students rather than suppress them. And she ended up becoming the digital minister of Taiwan. And then she created all these digital kind of tools to help government be more accessible and responsive to people. So, for instance, she created a platform where if anybody in Taiwan sees something they believe needs to get done, they can say, we need this to happen. And if 5,000 people, agree that that's a good idea, the government actually has to formally consider it. Yeah, there's a book called Plurality. It's a whole bit of a movement around how to
Check it
use
out.
technology
Mhm. Yeah,
to
yeah.
redesign government so it's more participatory.
Mhm.
But I kind of like, in a weird way, I share a little bit. I mean, as horrible as Trump is, a little bit of your admiration for, because everything just seems stuck for so long. Like, in a way that you can just break apart these structures and grab and move. And I know exactly the word you used was very good, actually. And I agree with you. That's something the left needs to adopt at some point.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about Trump is that he's got all the wrong ideas, but he's got the right style. He's the guy that sort of just by the sheer power of the people he's put around him, by the sheer power of his being. He's able to push things through and scare people and so on. And we on the left desperately need to have that same kind of a feeling, like he can do tariffs, and he can scare law firms and universities or whatever. He can get stuff like that done. Uh, but we on the left, we can push through two-cost markets. We can pass if we win power, we can pass a law that says no corporation should ever hold more than 25% of the market in any industry. That one law, if we pushed it through with the same ferocity that Trump has pushed through his stuff, then that one law, this idea that no company should ever have more than 25% of the pie, that would change everything. And we so-called the people on the left, so to speak, we could do that, but we are not doing it. We're not thinking that big, and we also need to shift the neoclassical economics paradigm. We need to sort of point out that economists don't really know what they're doing. They don't know how to measure progress. They keep on talking about growth, even though growth is sort of being, hurting us now. And we need to have a paradigm shift in the science of economics. And we on the left could push that paradigm shift through, but we're not doing it. So there's a lot of really big systemic heaves that need to happen. I think the most exciting thing for me right now is this idea that is it possible to have a third political party in America? Is it possible to come up with a bottoms up majority, bums I call it, and a party that starts to make a bit of headway in the midterms, and suddenly gets a few percentage points in 2028, and then somehow the young people of the world get behind it and build this party up into this party of systemic change that America really needs, and somehow wins the 2032 election, just like in a big surprise, just like the Trump won the current election. And it seems to me that one of the really big ideas that could fire up the Gen Z and the generations after that is this idea that we need our own political party. We need a party of systemic change that can pull off all these almighty heaves that can actually give us a future, can actually give us hope.
Yeah. And I think our concern more in the US right now is that there actually are not going to be free elections ever again. I mean, not only because of the gerrymandering and the kind of use of military in cities but also because of direct control of the voting system. I mean, there's some indication that 24 was already meddled with. But now one of Trump's allies has bought Dominion, which is the main voting system for 27 states. And so since their party, excuse me, doesn't really believe in fair elections.
Yeah, that's yeah. But of course, if I have a feeling that we need to do that. But again, that's something that trying to stop Trump from. I have a feeling that he really is making a play for some sort of a killing off of the constitutional system in America. I do believe that he's trying to do that, and it's a dangerous moment that we're living through. But again, to fight back against that is reactive, and I think we should fight back against that. And I'm surprised actually that there's hardly a Democratic politician or hardly anybody who really has taken Trump to task for the fact that he thinks that climate change is a hoax and that he won the 2020 election, and the fact that he's daily, almost daily, when I read the New York Times every day, I can see all the semi-fascist shit that he's pulling off, and we should fight back against that. We have to be reactive, but at the same time, what are we going to present to the people instead of what Trump is doing? We need a third political party. We need to sort of start winning elections again and putting all our energy into the Democratic Party and hoping that somehow that they will win the next election and fix things again. Even if they win the next election, they're not going to fix nothing. America's caught up in a tweedledum, tweedledee kind of a situation where whichever party wins, they never pull off any systemic change. They just make sure that they try to get re-elected again next time around. We need a third political party that stands for systemic heaves, systemic changes, and that's the only thing that can get us through the 21st century.
Another thinker that I've found somewhat interesting recently is this guy Kohei Sato from Japan.
Oh yeah, I love him.
Degrowth Communism.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I noticed that you're mainly focused on America, it seems like. What about in Canada? Is Canada, in a good state in terms of having a sort of level of socialization, socialism, kind of good social welfare, or would you want to see a revolution there too?
But that Kohei Sato, he's one guy who really understands what has to happen in economics. And we did an interview with him when his book first came out. And so he is actually, you asked me earlier, who's somebody that I really believe in. He's one guy that I think really has something important to say. But in Canada, Canada is a tenth of the size of America. We're always living in the shadow of America. At the moment, I'm bitterly disappointed that we're sort of trying to fight back against the Trumpian arrogance, the fact that he's talking about us becoming a 51st state, and recently, he fought back against this ad that we put out, that showed saying something profound about tariffs, and then Trump, somehow fought back and said, you can't do that. And now all of a sudden, all the politicians in Canada say, oh, yeah, sorry, we'll pull the ad. We'll be nice from now on, just don't put any more tariffs on us. And so, in Canada, the politicians are a bunch of pipsqueaks, who don't really have all that many big ideas of their own. I think if there's going to be a world revolution, then it has to start in America. Of course, it's already happening in, like, for example, I'm one of the wonderful things that's happened recently in my life is that the Gen Z, not in America, not in Canada, not in the Western world, not in the rich countries of the world, but in Madagascar and in Nepal and in Thailand and in a dozen countries in the Middle East and in Africa, they have actually pulled off revolutions in their own nations, in their own countries. In a way, that they have set the scene somehow. That it feels like Gen Z right now is at the beginning of that third revolution that I'm yearning for. But they, all those little revolutions that are happening in the Middle East and other places, that's going to help. That's going to maybe set the scene. Maybe we have something to learn from them. But I think if there's going to be a world revolution, it has to start in America. America is the only dynamic country that's big enough to be able to pull this thing off.
I guess the question with those Gen Z revolutions is what happens next, right? Because look at what happened with Arab Spring. It ended up being, kind of tragic. I don't think any of those countries did very well coming out of that.
Well, I mean, I think it made some progress. It certainly inspired Occupy Wall Street, and it generated a worldwide like those millions of people like me who were politicized during 1968. They were politicized in the aftermath of Arab Spring and Occupy Wall Street. So we did something. We created a new generation with new energy in a new generation. I mean, that of course that was 15 years ago now. That's quite a while ago, but I keep on getting phone calls and emails every morning from people who were involved in the Arab Spring and in Occupy Wall Street who said, yeah, that's the moment I woke up. That's the moment I became politicized. That's the moment I became an activist. So I think, let's not discount what happened with the Arab Spring and Occupy Wall Street. It all fizzled out, but it did a lot of good too.
Fair enough. And what about, tell me a little bit more about the book then. What else do you propose in the book going forward? So I like this idea of getting people to have small meetups. In fact, years ago, I had a thing called the Evolver Network, and we were cultivating local community groups. We're meeting up every month, but we just couldn't figure out how to get enough capital to have enough runway to grow it, which is often a problem with leftist groups. When you look at somebody like Charlie Kirk at Turning Point, I think he had like $12 million when he was like 18, 19 years old. They saw him as a rising star. They fully capitalized him. Whereas the left obviously doesn't have that opportunity. So a lot of things fizzle out because people just have to make a living somehow. But how do you imagine this this idea of these sort of like distributed groups that are really looking at what's the problems and proposing solutions? How do we make that happen? I'm all in on that one.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that I think we have to sort of go small. I think that it's wonderful to have 7 million people prancing around being reactive, but I think we need to sort of sit down in groups like the brainstorming groups that we have at Adbusters, 3 or 4 times a week, where 5, 6, 7 people sit around the table and they ask themselves, what can give us hope? What are the big ideas without which we cannot imagine a future? And to what extent are we, do we have the power, and how do we actually carry these things out? So I think that having some sort of a feeling that we, the left, have sort of lost the plot, and instead of going out and trying to act as if nothing has happened and do something on a 7 million level, I think we should sort of say, okay, we've lost it a little bit. We need to rethink everything. Let's retreat. Let's go back into ourselves. Let's have a bunch of small meetings. Let's start figuring out what our vision of the future is. I think that's the step number one that has to happen. And then out of all those thousands of little brainstorms, something will emerge. And then once it emerges, and we all with it, if we suddenly come up with the 7 big meta memes, the 7 big ideas, like true cost and like a 25% rule for corporate market share, and like the idea of a instead of just sort of getting angry at the mind lords and Facebook and Twitter and all the rest of it, why don't we launch a mental liberation front, that's got the same kind of energy like the Black Liberation Front had many years ago, and let's go after those fucking mind lords and just get rid of them, just vanquish the mind lords. This idea of a mental liberation front that can fix the internet, that can basically give us a new way for us to talk to each other. I mean, how can we possibly get anything done if we have to talk through the algorithms of the mind lords? It's impossible to imagine any kind of a future given the current communication system that we have. And another idea is this idea that there's something fundamentally wrong with the global financial architecture. We need to sort of stop these money boys, from running around and we basically need to sort of a Trumpian way of demolishing the current global financial system, getting rid of tax havens and imposing holding rules like from now on, if you want to buy a share, sure, you can buy it, but once you buy it, you have to keep it for 24 hours before you can sell it again. And that would eliminate, this flash trading that's happening right now. That's creating havoc. And and then above all, my favorite thing is this idea that capitalism has given us a vibe. It's given us feeling. There's a certain way that you feel when you walk down the street of a capitalist city. It's with ads everywhere and people, whatever, and somehow, we need to reform, the internet, and we need to come up with true-cost markets, and we need to change the way corporations behave and our relationship with them, and then we need to do all those things that I've been talking about. But above all, we have to change the way it feels to be alive today, and I think that we need to sort of one of my favorite quotes of all time is this guy Friedrich Hunterwasser. He long time ago, I think he's dead now. He said
An incredible designer, a designer and painter and designer.
yes, a fantastic designer, yeah. But he said this thing that I heard this at the beginning of Adbusters, 30 years ago. He said, "The straight line is godless and immoral." And when I heard that, it sort of seemed to be a sort of a culmination of everything I've believed in all my life. This idea that capitalist straight line that forces you to do things in a certain way, that hyper rationality that we in the West have always had. I think therefore I am, and all that stuff. That somehow the Western civilization somehow went wrong. When it believed too much in rationality and straight lines, and what really has to happen on that vibe level now, on that ambience level, on the level of how it feels to be alive today, is that we have to learn how to wobble again. We have to step off the straight line and learn how to wobble again. And that new vibe, that new feeling of what it feels like to wake up in the morning, and what it feels like to navigate the internet, what it feels like to watch TV, what it feels like to walk around in my city, that we have to learn how to wobble again. And if we continue on a straight line, then we're destined for doom. We're destined to fail. But if we learn how to wobble again, and there's a lot we can learn, from other cultures, like when I traveled around the world, then all those places I visited, or in Africa and even in Mexico and Central America, people there, they were wobbly. They weren't straight line people. They were people who had human connections, and they had weird ideas, and they smelled, and they weren't, they weren't using Old Spice, and they were real human beings, with everything that entails. And so I think that's the big lesson that we in especially the rich countries of the world. I mean, I don't think that America will be able to pull off a world revolution unless it learns how to wobble.
I love it. It's a very nice, that was a nice riff. I enjoyed the wobbling concept. I like the mental liberation front idea a lot too. Well, I mean, in a way, some people would say that what's happening in America now is a second American Revolution, just in the opposite direction. And there's also some theories around, when Trump met with Putin in Alaska, it was actually about agreeing to maybe hegemonic control, where Trump is just letting Putin do whatever he wants in Europe and East Europe. China will do whatever it wants in Asia and Taiwan, and America, US will do whatever it wants in Canada and Greenland and South America and Central America. Do you have any concerns about America trying to invade or annex Canada in the next few years?
Well, I have concerns about everything that America has done for the last 30, 40 years, given its Tweedledum, Tweedledee political system. I think that I mean, the Vietnam War was a disaster, the Iraq War was a disaster, Afghanistan was a disaster, and somehow the right wingers in the Democratic Party are now, stirring up the same old pot again. I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I don't think it's hard. I don't think it's possible for us to sort of really fight back in a meaningful way against that. The only thing that I would say is that let's get rid of Trump. Let's come up with our own political party, and let's get as long as Trump is in power, as long as he's able to do what he's doing every day now, going on TV and being this folksy guy who rules the world, the king of the world. I mean, we just have to stop him. That's all. And after that, the wars will still go on. Russia will still, Putin will still want to be the big the big king of his territory there, and China will still want to sort of beat America at its own game. But I think that, I think we should, we so-called the people on the left, we should put all our money into figuring out what our vision is and coming up with a third political party and getting it elected no later than 2032. And if we can do that, then a lot of the stuff that you're talking about will automatically heave in fresh new directions.
And how do we go about that practically? I mean, you have the idea, you put out the book. Are you going to try to make that happen as you sort of inspired Occupy Wall Street, or what do you see as the action plan?
I will try to sort of spark it. The same way that we did Occupy Wall Street. We didn't organize. We were not the leaders of Occupy Wall Street, but we sparked it. And I think that it's possible in the current geopolitical moment that we're living through. I think it's possible. I think the young people of the world are pissed off enough, hopeless enough, feeling lost enough, and I think that it's that the current psycho condition, the way the neurons are working now in the young people, I think that the young people of the world are ready for some sort of a big heave, some sort of a heave where we jump over the dead bodies of the old left and right and just worry about how we're going to make it through the 21st century. And that requires sort of a whole new way of thinking about politics. And if we can do that, then there'll be a whole new way of thinking about wars. There'll be a whole new way of thinking about, how many people should be on the Security Council of the United Nations. There'll be if the young people of the world can come up with a new political power base using the internet, then nothing is impossible after that. We can do anything we want after that. As long as we have the internet, as long as we have our big ideas, as long as we have a little bit of that Trumpian fuck it all attitude.
So all we need is a big heave, and then we get back to the wobble, and we're good.
Yeah, I know it's easy to make fun of that, but
no, I was enjoying it. I wasn't making fun of it. I liked.
I think I'm not. We're a small organization. We have 7 or 8 people working for us, and we're struggling every moment, to survive. And we're capable of creating sparks. But I don't think that we have unless somebody gives us a couple of $1 million, then we're not in a position to sort of actually launch that political party. Although you can go to the adbusters.org and you can become a founding member of the Bottoms Up Party of America. You can do that. And that could be the beginning of something. If we can get, let's say we can get 100,000 people who say, yeah, I want a bottoms-up party of America. I want a bums party, and I can start doing it, in my state or whatever. That could be the beginning of something. So what's going to happen over the next few years is that the human condition around the world is going to get worse and worse and worse. It's going to get hotter. Summers are going to be harder and harder to live through. And jobs are going to be harder to find. Everything will start tanking in a big time way. And when that happens, then a spark like this idea of a Gen Z new political party that rises up in America and changes everything, that's sort of an idea, that sort of a spark could actually light a fire.
Cool, Kalle. Well, it was wonderful to meet you and chat for a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's maybe do it again.
Yes.
I forgot to mention this will be on YouTube, and if well, first off, they want to find Adbusters at adbusters.org. They can join the Bottoms Up Political Party in America, and they can also like and subscribe and share this video. It would be helpful. And yeah, let's stay in touch. And really appreciate your work and your vision. And hopefully we see the heave.
Yeah. And you keep on writing good stuff. I want to keep on reading more of your good stuff.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Adios, amigo.